Tilly Gets Her Man by S.E. Smith. Performed by P.J. Oakland. Chapter 1. Tilly Graham pushed the wayward strands of curly, blondish-brown hair out of her eyes as she worked on the old boiler in the basement of the sorority house. The stupid thing wasn't working again, and the small college's maintenance staff said that the only guy who knew how to repair it would be out for 2 weeks. With temperatures threatening to dip down into the single digits over the next week, the girls had begged Tilly to see if she could fix the darn thing. Tilly's gaze moved impatiently to the clock for the 100th time. It was almost time for the midnight story hour, hosted by none other than the delicious Angus Bell. A feathery sigh escaped Tilly. The man had the sexiest voice she had ever heard. She was addicted to the stories he read every night at midnight. "Hi, Tilly," Angela called from the stairs. Tilly glanced over her shoulder in surprise. "What are you doing up?" Tilly asked. "We're all freezing and wondered if you were having any luck," Angela replied, pulling the thick blanket around her so she could sit down on the steps. "Almost," Tilly answered, glancing up at the clock she had brought down with her again. She had 10 minutes before Angus came on. "The relay on the board was bad. I rebuilt it and it should be good. I had to use parts out of Sue's radio." A low groan pulled Tilly's attention back to the stairs. She grimaced when she saw Amy sink down beside Angela. Sue, Betty Ann, and Velma had come down as well. Tilly scowled and glanced back up at the clock. 5 minutes. 5 minutes until the man of her dreams came on, and she was going to have an audience to her imaginary crush on Angus Bell, because there was no way she was going to miss his program. "Why did you have to use my radio?" Sue whined. "Velma never listens to hers." "I do too," Velma snapped, pulling the knitted cap down over the tight curlers in her hair. "I don't know why Tilly couldn't have used her own radio." "I do," Betty Ann chirped, folding her gloved hands together and fluttering her eyelashes. "Tonight with Angus Bell, master of science fiction and other worldly stories, on WQCT, the college station everyone listens to." Tilly's lips twitched. Betty Ann actually did a great impression of Angus. With a sigh, she glanced back up at the clock. 2 minutes until she heard the real thing. She quickly replaced the tools into the small toolbox she had made out of an old cloth sewing satchel. "Angus Bell?" Sue exclaimed with a confused frown. "You mean that guy with the glasses who's always dropping his books in the library and getting in trouble for coming into literature class late?" "Yes, that Angus Bell," Betty Ann giggled. "You two have seen him? You know who he is?" Tilly demanded, snapping the cover back on the boiler panel and flipping the breaker back on, before turning to stare at the small group sitting on the staircase watching her. "Oh, his show is starting." Tilly grabbed the small transistor radio off the shelf and turned it on at the same time as the boiler kicked into life. The other girls squealed in delight at having heat again. Tilly didn't hear any of that. She was focused on Angus Bell's deliciously smooth voice. With a sigh, she pushed between Angela and Amy and sat down to listen to the broadcast. "Welcome to Tonight with Angus Bell, master of science fiction and other worldly stories, on WQCT, the college station everyone listens to. I'd like to thank you for joining me for tonight's tale, A World Within." Angus's husky voice said. "I've got to agree. He does have the sweetest sounding voice over the radio," Betty Ann remarked with a dreamy sigh. "Too bad he isn't that smoking in real life." "Shush," Velma whispered, nodding toward where Tilly was sitting, with a soft smile on her lips and a dreamy expression on her face. Tilly ignored Betty Ann's comment and the other women's sudden silence. Instead, she lost herself in Angus's voice and story. She didn't even move when the others finally grumbled that now that there was heat, they were all going back to bed. She sat on the hard, cold stairs, listening to the hour-long program, completely enthralled by the man behind the tantalizing story. "I'm going to marry that man," Tilly finally murmured, when Angus wished everyone a warm good night. "I've just got to figure out how to meet him first." A grin curved her lips when she remembered Sue's comment that Angus was always in the library. Rising eagerly off the steps, Tilly twirled around and headed back up the steps. Her large, fluffy slippers didn't make a sound as she swept into the quiet common room of the century-old house. At barely 5 feet tall, the other girls liked to tease her about her endless amounts of energy, quick wit, strange sense of humor, and amazing intelligence. She was #1 in her engineering classes. She was also working with a new government data system. One of the pieces of equipment that she had designed made the process faster and less cumbersome than the current system. She was going places in the world, but she wasn't going alone. Operation Angus Bell slowly materialized in her mind. Step 1, introduce herself. And if that doesn't work, I'll just kidnap him and wow him with my brilliance. Tilly laughed in delight, twirling around in a circle as she held the small radio to her chest. Tilly and Angus Bell. It sounds perfect. Chapter 2. Angus Bell sighed as he gathered up his notebook and books at the end of his last class of the day. It was filled with his current story for the nightly broadcast that he did on the local college station. When he decided to take the radio broadcasting class, he had no idea that he would be given a nightly spot on the radio station that was in the room in the basement of his fraternity house. He sighed when he thought of the array of antennas that stood like a lighthouse beacon, advertising the only fraternity house on campus reserved for geeks like him. "Hey, Angus!" a voice called out to him. Angus turned and waited for Harry to catch up with him. Harry lived in the same house as he did, and also had a spot on the radio. Those two things were the only similarities between them. Harry had joined the list of cast members in the hope that it would help him win the affection of some of the girls on campus. Angus knew that Harry was hoping that it would change him from a dweeb into a star overnight. Angus, unlike Harry, knew better than to believe that. He had learned in high school that the girls normally preferred the more athletic types rather than the intellectual ones at this age. Of course, it didn't help when you combined intelligence with a shy disposition and a preference for having your head in another galaxy either, he thought with a deep sigh. He had only seen one girl that interested him. He didn't know her name, just that she fluttered from one place to another, like a tiny fairy moving from flower to flower. He had seen her working on one of the radio station antennas once. He had hoped to meet her, but by the time he got to the sorority house, she was gone. He had seen her several more times, but she always seemed to vanish before he reached her. After months of chasing her, he finally decided that it was probably just as well that she had flitted away. Someone as beautiful as her wouldn't give a guy like him the time of day, much less go out on a date with him, he thought in resignation. Besides, he only had one more semester to go before he graduated. There was still plenty of time to find the right woman out there in the world. There had to be one that would love a shy nerd like him. Someone who understood his love of writing and science fiction. A sigh of regret filled him when the delicate image of the girl he had seen danced through his mind. If only. Oh, hello, Harry. How was your date last night? It was last night, wasn't it? Angus asked, looking slightly confused as he tried to remember exactly what day of the week it was. She didn't show up, Harry replied, falling into step with Angus. She said she had to wash her hair and it didn't dry in time. Did she reschedule for another night? Angus asked absently, stopping to pick up his pen when it slipped out of his hand. No, she said she was going home this weekend. I thought I'd go as well. I just wanted to ask if you'd mind doing a double shift this weekend on the radio to cover for me, Harry said, pushing open the door to the building. It's my mom's birthday. You know how that goes, he added awkwardly. Oh, yes. Yes, I do know, Angus replied, thinking of his own unusual mother. He had definitely taken after his father in both looks and clumsiness, he thought in discouragement. Of course. What were you going to talk about this weekend? Harry smiled in relief. The migratory flight of the hummingbird, and which came first, the chicken or the egg, he exclaimed with a laugh. I thought the second would generate some very good discussion. What do you think? Angus paused and pushed the black frame of his glasses up on his nose. He released a startled oath when the notebook started to slip from his other hand. An exclamation of frustration froze on his lips when the notebook was caught before it could hit the ground. His gaze ran over the slender fingers holding it before it slowly traveled up a delicate arm and was captured by a pair of dancing, dark green eyes. That's mine, he mumbled, blinking in slow motion as if afraid the vision in front of him would disappear. It was his dream girl, the one he had been searching for, and always just a tad too late to find. You look just like the beautiful maiden in Hans Christian Andersen's Thumbelina. Angus flushed when he heard Harry snort at his reference to a beloved fairy tale character. Reaching out, he wrapped his fingers around the notebook and pulled it out of the young woman's hand. In the process, he dropped his pen again. He almost fell when he bumped his head against her forehead when they bent at the same time. Embarrassed, Angus stood up and flushed an even darker red. A scowl creased his brow when Harry didn't bother hiding his amusement. Here you go, the woman said, holding out his pen with one hand, while she absently rubbed her forehead where they had collided. Thank you, miss, Angus muttered, taking the pen from her outstretched hand. Is there something I can do for you? He asked in aggravation, when she continued to stand there staring up at him, with a slightly bemused expression on her face. What? Oh, yes, I was wondering if you would like to go out with me tonight, she exclaimed, with a wide smile that lit up her face. There's a new band playing downtown. I thought we could grab a bite to eat and go check them out. What? Angus replied, as his dazed mind tried to understand the words coming out of her mouth, when all he could think about was how intriguing she was, and how much he'd love to kiss her curved lips. She's asking you out on a date, Angus, Harry responded, pushing Angus to the side. He has to work, but I'm available. I thought that you were going home for your mother's birthday. Angus started to interject, before he clamped his lips tightly together, and his face drooped. He's right. I have to work. But your show doesn't start until midnight, the woman protested with a frown. And I'm asking him, not you, she added, glancing in annoyance at Harry. Hey, Tilly, come on. Class is about to start, another girl called out from behind them. Angus glanced over to where 4 girls were standing and staring at him. They whispered to each other, before bursting into a fit of giggles. He could feel his face heating again, and pushed his glasses up in annoyance. Typical adolescent behavior, he thought in reproach. This is why he needed to stay focused on his stories, his classes, and his broadcast. "I hope you have a good day," he said stiffly, before turning on his heel. "Angus," the woman called in a soft voice. Angus's shoulders stiffened, and he half debated on ignoring the soft plea in her voice. With a heavy sigh, he reluctantly turned back to the tiny figure. Standing slightly away from her, he swallowed when he saw her form-fitting jeans hugging her hips. His gaze moved leisurely upward before locking on her face. This time, he was surprised to see that it was her cheeks that had turned to a rosy red. "Yes," he responded in a slightly formal tone. She bit her lip and took a step closer to him. His gaze flickered to the women behind her and Harry, but she ignored everyone else. His eyes widened when he saw that instead of a mocking or triumphant look in her eyes, there was a hint of uncertainty. "My name is Tilly Graham. I listen to your show every night. I think you are fantastic. I really would like to see you again," Tilly whispered, staring up into his eyes. "I have to work all weekend," he mumbled, his mind whirling with how he could get out of it, but coming up blank. "Perhaps next week. Oh, it's spring break. Perhaps the week after that," he added faintly. "I'm available," Harry said again, looking over Angus's shoulder and grinning. "Tilly!" all four girls called out at the same time. "I've got to go. Midterms," Tilly said, stepping back several steps. "Are you broadcasting tonight?" "Yes. A double shift, starting at 10 o'clock, Angus said, watching the smile light up her face again. "I'll be listening," Tilly promised. "See you soon." Angus watched in disbelief as Tilly twirled around and took off across the grass at a sprint that would have amazed any track coach. She bent and scooped up the backpack lying on the ground and a colorful bag before catching up with the other girls. "Wow!" Harry breathed out in awe. "She's cute." "She's more than cute," Angus replied with a shake of his head. "She's the kind of girl that a guy could fall for. Hard." Harry grimaced. "Where's the fun in that?" he grumbled, turning away when Angus took a step in the direction of the library. "Everything," Angus retorted. "I'll need your notes on hummingbirds. I don't know anything about their migratory habits." Chapter 3. "Are you crazy?" Velma exclaimed. "Angela, Betty Ann, Sue, intervention time." Tilly tapped her toe of her left foot impatiently on the floor. Her arms were folded and her lips were pressed together with determination. 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since she asked Angus out, and she had yet to hear from him. "Tilly, this is getting kind of," Betty Ann started to say, looking frantically at the other girls for some help. "Weird stalking obsession, maybe?" Angela replied dryly. "No, it isn't," Tilly replied with a wave of her hand. "He has never once said no. He just hasn't called me back." "Yes, but haven't you thought that maybe he isn't interested in you?" Sue asked in a gentle voice. Tilly's eyes filled with tears. Raising a hand, she impatiently brushed it across her eyes. Yes, she had thought of that. But she just knew that wasn't the reason he hadn't called her. She had left her number and a small note on the broadcast console when she worked on it over spring break. She had asked for Angus to call her when he got a chance. All the guys in the house had left for the week. Tilly had stayed on campus. It gave her time to work on some of the stuff the college gave her to fix and make some extra spending money. Unfortunately, the only one who had contacted her was that creep Harry. "He is interested," Tilly said in a soft, stubborn voice. "How do you know?" Velma asked, with a raised eyebrow. "Because every night he has been closing off his broadcast with a reference to Thumbelina," Tilly whispered. "I know he is interested. That's what he said I reminded him of." "Then why hasn't he called you? I mean, you left your number for him in the broadcast room when you went to fix that piece that broke, didn't you?" Angela asked. "Maybe he's just talking about something else." "Or someone else," Velma pointed out. "It may be a line he uses with all the other girls." Tilly shook her head and folded her arms again. "No, he's not like that," she insisted. "He's sweet and smart and just dreamy." "He's weird," Velma retorted dryly. Betty Ann giggled before looking apologetically at Tilly. "She's right, Tilly. He's always mumbling to himself and writing in those notebooks," she said before her voice faded when Tilly turned to glare at her. "He is not weird. He is just thinking out loud, and those notebooks are going to make him rich one day. You mark my words. Angus Bell has a brilliant mind, and his imagination and stories are unbelievable," Tilly growled, lowering her arms and clenching her fists. "Okay, he's brilliant," Angela interjected, coming to stand in front of Tilly. "But really? Kidnapping him? What are you going to do once you've got him?" Tilly's eyes lifted to look with a silent plea at Angela. "Just talk," Tilly whispered. "And it's not really kidnapping. I'm just going to lock myself in the broadcast room with him until he either agrees to go out with me or tells me once and for all he's not interested in me." "Why?" Sue demanded in exasperation, throwing her hands up in the air. "What is it about Angus Bell that is making you act like a raving lunatic?" Tilly turned to look at Sue. She bit her lip, debating if she should confess her infatuation with Angus. How did she explain that she knew deep down that he was the man for her, and she knew she was the woman for him? She understood his stories. They touched something deep inside her that she understood. It was more than science fiction. It was a vision of what was really out there, somewhere, in the vast universe that they called home. "I think I love him," Tilly whispered, turning so that she could stare at each of her sorority sisters. "Deep down, it's more than his stories. I just want to find out if it's for real. Will you help me?" All the girls looked at each other. Tilly knew they were questioning not only her sanity, but their own. The only way down to the broadcast room was through the front door of the House of Geeks, as the fraternity house was called. She would have to get past the other residents and down into the basement without getting caught. She could do it on her own, but it would be faster and more fun with her friend's help. A collective of loud sighs escaped all of the girls. She was going to owe some major debt if this worked, she thought in amusement, when she saw the pained expression on Velma's face. Even so, she could see that they were going to help her. "Okay," Angela finally said. "What do you want us to do?" Tilly grinned and rubbed her hands together. This might not only be rewarding for her, but one of the craziest stunts that the others had done in their entire lives. Operation Angus Bell was about to go into full swing. Chapter 4. Tilly glanced around the side of the building. It was just after 11 o'clock in the evening. She grimaced when she heard some drunken shouts of laughter from the house next door. Doing this on a Friday night might not have been the best time, but she was tired of waiting. She adjusted the headgear she had on and positioned the tip of the microphone closer to her mouth. Now, she just needed to wait for the others to get into place. "This is Team Leader 1 to Black Ninja. Operation Angus Bell has begun. Are you ready, Tilly?" Betty Ann whispered into the two-way radio she was carrying. "I see 2 targets sitting on the front porch." "Who is Team Leader 1? Velma breathed out in her ear. "It's Betty Ann," Sue responded. "I'm Little Red Riding Hood." "Oh, I like that one, Sue," Angela exclaimed over her radio. "Is Tilly Black Ninja?" "Yep," Betty Ann whispered back. "We are using code names in case anyone is listening in." "Who am I?" Angela asked in confusion. "Who do you want to be?" Angela asked. "I know," Sue said excitedly. "Mae West. You'd be a great Mae West, Velma." "Oh, yeah. I'm totally the Mae West, with this head of blonde curls and big boobs." "Angela, who are you?" Velma chuckled. "Lonesome Dove," Angela replied. "I so love that movie. If only I could find me a handsome cowboy." "I think you need to check 3 houses down. I heard country music playing from there." Tilly couldn't help chirping in. "I'm checking them out on the way back," Angela vowed. "Okay, what do we do next?" Betty Ann said there were 2 targets on the porch. Personally, I think nerds is a better description. Did you see what they were doing? "There's nothing wrong with playing chess," Tilly hissed, staring at the 2 guys sitting across from each other. "Tilly, it's Friday night, for crying out loud," Velma groaned. "Friday night. Look at the house next door. Do you think anyone is playing chess there?" Tilly released an exasperated sigh. "Not everyone enjoys killing off their brain cells when they are young, Velma," she hissed back. "Yeah, just take a look at us," Angela retorted. "You know, Tilly, I don't think that they serve beer in the local jail." "This is so going to look bad on my resume," Sue remarked. "Kidnapping is a felony, isn't it?" "Yes, and I'm not technically kidnapping him," Tilly replied with a huff of breath. "I'm merely detaining him in his own home. Besides, you don't even like beer, Sue." "Well, I do," Velma retorted. "She's right, Sue. No one will even know we were involved. The only one who has the potential to get caught is Tilly. And we all promise to bail her out if she does," Angela reminded everyone. "Okay, now what?" "Tilly, Angus goes on in less than an hour. You're going to have to hurry if you want to get some kinky sex with him." "You! TMI, Angela," Betty Ann complained. "I wonder if he even knows what to do." "Will you gals just shut up already?" Sue complained. "Between jail and the thought of Tilly and Angus having kinky sex, I'm about ready to go join the house next door and lose a few brain cells and my virginity." "Okay, you girls get the nerds out of the way," Tilly explained. "I'll go over the balcony and in through the front door once you girls lead the guys away." "Good luck, Tilly," Angela replied. "Yeah, blow his mind," Velma added with a giggle. "Ugh," Sue and Betty Ann groaned. Tilly watched as the other 4 girls stepped out from behind the trees further down the road and started walking up the sidewalk. Each was dressed in a different outfit that showed off either their long legs or the tight tops. She shook her head when she heard the catcalls coming from some of the guys from the fraternity house next door. From the way they were hanging off the railing, the distraction was working. Just on the wrong guys. "Come on, notice them already," Tilly muttered under her breath. "Geez, look at the girls already." Tilly released her breath when the two guys on the front porch finally looked up to see what all the hollering was about. Velma was doing her best Mae West impression. She walked right up to the steps and leaned forward so that her ample cleavage was showing. "Hey, boys, could you give us girls a hand?" Velma purred. "Yeah, or two," Sue added, turning just enough to thrust out her breasts. Tilly fought the urge to roll her eyes. Distraction was one thing. This was more a full-force assault. The two guys were practically falling over themselves to get closer. Taking a deep breath, she darted forward across the small yard. Reaching up, she grabbed the railing and pulled her leg up to get her foot between it. It was a stretch for her, but she was determined to climb over it. She almost fell backwards when the door opened and two more guys hurried out. Holding onto the railing, she peeked through the slats. A wave of relief swept through her when she saw that Angus wasn't one of them. Glancing at her watch, she saw that she had 35 minutes before his show began. Tilly slowly pulled herself up and over the railing when the four guys followed the other girls. She couldn't help but grin. They had decided that Angela's old Mazda was going to have engine trouble. Tilly had loosened the battery cable. She wondered how long it would take the guys to figure that out. Glancing back at the retreating figures, she silently walked toward the screen door. She planned on going through the window, but decided the door would be easier. There were currently 5 guys living in the house, and only one was still in there. Betty Ann had gleaned that little bit of information from Harry when he called asking if Tilly had changed her mind about going out with him. She listened at the door for a moment before peering through the screen. Carefully opening it, she winced when it made a loud squeaking noise. Tilly stuck her head inside and glanced around. The coast was clear. She slipped inside and hurried past the center staircase to the door leading down to the basement. With an excited grin, she pulled the door open and gazed down at the dimly lit stairs. Tilly raised a trembling hand to push her curls away. Her heart was pounding, and her palms were sweaty. She hadn't been this flustered since she built her first engine in the 3rd grade and had to show her dad and grandpa that it worked. "This is it, Tilly," she whispered, staring down the stairs. "You're opening yourself up to heartache." She pushed down the negative thoughts. She refused to believe that Angus wasn't the man she was destined to be with. If just hearing his voice hadn't convinced her, then seeing him up close had definitely sealed her belief that they were a match made in the stars. There had been an electrical charge and a chemical reaction in their first touch. "Come on, Tilly, get your feet to work," she murmured, stepping down so that she could close and lock the door behind her. She slowly descended the steps, trying to be as quiet as she could. At the bottom, she could see the soft glow of light coming from the console. She paused and frowned when she saw the chair in front of it was empty. Panic swept through her, and she felt a sudden rush of despair. A soft curse started to escape her at the injustice of life trying to mess with her destiny. Her lips parted, but the curse turned into a startled gasp when a hand reached out and wrapped around her right wrist. With a slight jerk, she lost her balance and fell into Angus Bell's arms. "Angus!" Tilly whispered in shock, staring up into his dancing brown eyes. "And you, my delicate black ninja, are now my prisoner," Angus exclaimed, with a slightly menacing smile pulling at his lips.
"Oh,"
Tilly choked, her mind going blank when he suddenly lowered his head toward hers. "You really should have used a different frequency, Tilly Graham, because now you are mine," Angus whispered in a soft voice before he captured her lips with his. Tilly's eyes widened as his words sank in, before her eyelashes fluttered closed and she reached up to wrap her arms around Angus's neck. The sharp charge that had struck her the first time flashed through her again. She didn't complain when he removed her headphone and tossed it aside. He didn't complain when she unbuttoned his shirt and pushed it off his shoulders. Their loud gasps and moans filled not only the basement, but the airwaves, as they both would later find out. Never before in the history of the college radio station had there ever been a larger audience, nor a more interesting broadcast. In the excitement, Angus had forgotten to start his pre-recorded broadcast, and the listeners were given a live performance that would go down in college history as being the most exciting and love-filled one yet. This has been Tilly Gets Her Man by S.E. Smith. Performed by P.J. Oakland. Copyright 2016 by Susan E. Smith. Production copyright 2016 by Susan E. Smith. Thanks for listening.